Right, we're trying to repair this piece that's been cut out of the bulkhead, and I'm making up a block of wood to go into the hole to repair the main area, but I've got to shape it down so that it's a lot thinner, because we're going to put plywood scarf joints over the top and on the ends to completely disguise it, so it probably then looks more or less intended or original. But it's not difficult, but it's time consuming. And if you look at the end of the bulkhead where I cut it through, you can see how complex the original construction was. It was all done in layers and it's beautifully jointed, and it must have taken hours to construct it as the original, but that's what gave the glider its strength. When the block was in the hole, I've marked how I've got to now reduce it in thickness by pencil, and I'm going to now chisel it and plane it down to that level, and we'll have to take it back and try it to see how it fits and add a bit more on, because it's quite critical to get it the right level so the new bit of ply will follow through at the same curve. The tricky bit is understanding the grain, so that as I'm chiselling in, it doesn't split the wrong side of the line. And it's a bit like a cat's fur. If you brush it the wrong way, it will rough up. If you brush it the right way, it doesn't tear. It'll probably take me perhaps an hour to get it right, but it's important to get it right, otherwise whatever I then do won't fit. If I was to chisel it the other way, it would just split much lower than the line I want to try and get it to.
What type of wood are you using?
Oh, this is just an ordinary, very cheap softwood, but it doesn't matter because it's hidden.
Yeah.
And it'll be covered by the ply. All we're doing is providing the base so that we can stick the ply to it. And it's fairly soft and fairly easy to chisel. Don't try and take too much off at once, but you can sort of control how it splits ahead of the chisel. It doesn't always work, and I've fixed a bit of wood where there aren't any knots in it, because a knot will just make it so much harder. I'll come round the other side and come in at the other angle. Look, I've got to scoop it out to match the curve of the fuselage. Now, it's a slow process, but if you do it sort of in the right order, you get the result that you want. Helps if you've got the chisel nice and sharp. So for the final cut, I'll probably sharpen the chisel up. Right, I'll come back around the other side now. If you do, and sometimes if you slice the chisel, you get a better cut than if you just push it square. It can chew the wood, but it's called paring. That's looking, that's looking quite good now.
Yeah, it's good.
I'll probably go and offer it into the hole and see how near we are before I go too far. You can always take a little bit more off. It doesn't have to be precision, but certainly as close as we can get it. After I rough shaped the block, I then revisited the hole to make sure of dimensions, and I've had to finish off curving the inside face because it's got to match the curve of the fuselage bulkhead, and I've sanded it and got it exactly to the right shape that I need. And then, having done that, I made sure that it was the exact length to match the bulkhead, because ultimately we're going to put a cover piece of ply over the surface so that it completely disguises it. And ultimately another piece of ply will come up the centre and go over the two sides of it, and I've initially put the scarf joint on the bottom piece, but there's a bit of a complication at the top because in manufacture the glider is made with a slot which is designed to absorb stresses, but it's meant that the ply is a bit bulgy. So I've got to support that before I can cut that scarf joint on the top. And to do that, I've made an extra block that I've got to glue in, so that once it's in position, this screw is just to hold it. I can then fix the ply to stop it bulging, and when it's all solid I can then do that scarf joint on the top, and then it's ready for the final apply on the surface. Thank you, Martin, for mixing that up. Right, this is the block, and I put a temporary screw in there because it will help me hold it while I manoeuvre it into position. So we're now going to put the glue as best as I can. The important bit is to get some on that top face, because that's where the ply is going to go into it, and you have to put it on both surfaces. Goodness knows how long it took them to do it originally, with all these separate parts and layers. It must have taken hours to glue it all together and then hold it over a special jig. The trick is getting it in without getting it all over your hands. Now you can see the usefulness of the screw. Getting it level at the bottom, because that's where it's going to join the new block, and also just as importantly level there. Now we screw the screws in. Before I tighten it fully up, I want to check that it's still in line, because that's what the ply, the new piece of ply, has got a bed onto. Well, I'm fairly happy with that. So I'm going to hold the screw, because that's now the backing for this pouty bit. Right, I'm fairly happy with that. Stage 2 is getting the main block in place. Actually, we'll put it on the hole first. There's no need really to rush, because the glue in the cold weather takes quite a time to go off. But it is tricky, and you just want to make sure you don't hang around too long. First time I've done this, so
Not the easiest stuff to work, especially when you're working upside down, like you know,
no.
gravity takes over.
Yes. easier to be put on with a brush, but we do that, it's the end of the brush. I'm happy that we got enough. So we now put it on the block. The 2 screws will hold it in place while the glue sets, which in this sort of weather could be 3 or 4 days. And again, when the original fuselage was made, the work that was involved in gluing all those small laminations together was incredible, really. Right, I'm quite happy with that. Clean it up and just take off the surplus, and that's a very good stage reached. When the glue is set, I can then pin the ply back to that block, which is now really solid, and then once I've done that, I can then scarf joint the edge to match the bottom, and then make up the new patch to go in on the top. And that can be glued and stapled in position. The basic plan is to get both ends scarfed, and then we'll put a new piece in with the reverse scarfing on the back, and then hold it whilst the glue sets at the curve, and then it should then all follow through in one line. There's a little way to go yet. Nothing's sort of at the right angle, because it's dead easy when you're making up the new patch. You can put it on a bench and work on top of it, but there isn't another option, so we just do the best. And gradually you can see the slope appearing. It won't be exactly perfect, a bit like the bottom, but and again where the ply is old and it's a bit weathered, it breaks away on the edge, but the important bit is that finished line, because the glue will fill up some of the joint when it's cramped under pressure. So I'll just keep going until we've got there. Having now got that dimension finished, I'm ready to make up the patch to go in on the top. And I've cut it to length. When it's glued in and curved, we've got it exactly the right length. And I've marked the width of the scarf joint on each end. So the next job is now to plane that to create the matching scarf on the bulkhead, and then it can be glued and pinned in position and held back so that it all then will follow, we hope, in line. Before I'm going to attempt to do that, the secret of any woodwork is to make sure that your tools are nice and sharp. So I'm going to give the plane a little sharpen up. Traditionally it was an oil stone with oil, but I've found that continued use the oil stone will go hollow, so I've sort of treated myself to a diamond faced stone, and it's water based, so that makes it easy. but it does stay flat, and when you're sharpening up something wide like a plane, that certainly helps, because you don't want the blade to be curved. And the secret is holding it square on the stone. And I tend, if I go like that, it will be curved, so I do it at a slight angle, and I can just about gauge the right angle, and then just evenly go back and forward, and I move each side of the stone. And what I'm trying to do is put a little burr on the back of the blade, because grinding that face, it sort of rolls the metal around and you get a slight burr, and then when you've got that, it's getting rid of the burr. So you rub it flat on the back of the stone, which puts the burr around the other side again. So a couple of little strokes, and sometimes you can see the fine wire of the burr has come off. There's the burr, it's come off on the stone. This is the back of the plane iron, which when you're planing it breaks the shavings as they come out of the plane. You don't want to take too much off at once, just do it in little amounts. And to do it properly, that's too flimsy, so I'm going to fix it to something quite solid. Line the edge up with the edge of the wood. This is a nice straight solid bit of wood. The easiest way is just to staple it. These little holes won't show when it's finally done. And we're ready to go. I can't go any higher than that line, and I've got to get the bottom line like a knife edge. There we are, it's starting now to, because the plane's nice and sharp, the shavings are coming off nice and evenly, not too thick. I'm getting close to the top line now, so I've got to tip the plane down a bit, and you can see the different layers of the ply appearing. I'm not doing it square because that will tear the wood. I'm slicing it again because you get a cleaner cut. I can feel the plane is square on the wood, and it's all about feel more than anything. More or less there. I've just gone fractionally too far, but I don't think that'll matter, because when it's glued in position, the glue will fill up that little variance there. So we'll take another half stroke this side, and I've just broken through on the bottom edge, and I don't think I could get it any better than that.
Sorry.
Both sides, or?
No, one side will do. Thank you.
Two strips enough, Terry?
Yeah. You can get them out there, all right.
Yeah. This is the same principle as on the other scarf joint. We're putting the pressure rack actually on the two angled scarf joints like we did on the other side. Okay, well, we've got to the last bit of the job, which is just tidying up the cosmetic side of it, and I've made up a couple of small cover patches which are sort of cosmetic things that we're going to put on the bulkhead, really just to hide up the structure of the repair, and I'll glue them in place and they'll be pinned in position whilst the glue sets. But first of all, I'll mix up the glue, which will be the way we're going to hold them in place, and it's a special aircraft quality glue that's a resin glue, but it's quite a strong glue, and I think the hardener's got some sort of chemical in it that you have to wear protection because it's quite corrosive on your hands. And it's mixed up 50-50 basically, which is quite easy. It's a very expensive glue, so best if you don't mix too much up, and certainly don't put the wrong lid on the wrong tin at the end because you'll never get it off. Hardener has to be stirred well. Because it settles down and then it loses its effectiveness. But this was used on all the woodwork joints when the glider was first made, and we've followed that practice with all the repairs. And it is a very strong glue, and it dries sort of glass hard, although it does take 2 or 3 days to gain its best strength, and the cold does affect it. I'm going to sort of guess how much we want. And we don't need an awful lot. When it does dry off in the pot, it breaks out quite easily. So you can use the same pot again. A similar amount of resin. Maybe a touch more. It's not an exact science, but well, I certainly wouldn't want to try and measure it out in a special syringe. Araldite is a similar sort of adhesive, which is a bit more of a common product. It sort of all comes from the same sort of resin family of a resin and a hardener. So just before we go up and do the gluing, I've prepared one of the patches with a couple of pins to help me just locate it once I put the glue on it, and I've just put the pin through so it's just protruding, because that'll be the way that the patch will just hold itself in place, and then once it's up there and in position, we'll then put all the other pins in. That should, just that little bit of pin projecting should just hold it whilst we go up and locate it. And I have marked a pencil line round the space to give me a guide as to where to put the patch, because what I want to do is make sure I hide up the screw hole on all of the repair piece that's behind, you know, the surface patch. I can now hold the bit of patch with one of the pins, which is handy, which is another good reason for putting the pins in. It's not a structural repair, so we don't need too much glue, and equally I don't want to make a mess with the glue running out. I just put a little bit on the bulkhead, and I've drawn a pencil line roughly where it should be. Right. Right, that's done that. I'll take my gloves off because the proper pins are so small. And I've pre-drilled the holes to help save the pins bending. This isn't an original part of the Horsa, but it does at least look as though it was intended. And there we are. I'll take the dummy pins out. Job done.